Imagine a filmmaker who wins an Oscar, achieves just like massive international fame, and is essentially handed a blank check by the entire movie industry.
Right, literally the dream scenario for any director.
Exactly. But instead of taking the easy road, he decides to build a massive, fully functioning mini city out of glass and steel. I mean, an actual city, just to make one single movie.
Yeah, it's completely wild.
And it takes him 9 years to build. It bankrupts him, it forces the sale of his family home, and it just completely destroys his production company.
It's the ultimate cautionary tale of artistic obsession, really.
It is. It's as if Charlie Chaplin decided to build an actual functioning metropolis just to make one movie, and today's deep dive into your sources is all about that visionary.
Right, today we're focusing on Jacques Tati. He was this legendary French mime, actor, and director.
The bumbling guy in the raincoat.
Exactly, Monsieur Hulot. And to put his influence into perspective, despite directing only 6 feature-length films in his entire life, he was voted 46th in an Entertainment Weekly poll of the greatest directors of all time.
Wait, top 50 with only 6 movies?
Yeah, just 6. He created one of cinema's most enduring, iconic characters. But our mission today isn't just to look at the comedic genius who inspired Mr. Bean or, heavily influenced Steven Spielberg.
No, we want to explore the deeply human, incredibly messy story of a man who risked absolutely everything for an uncompromising artistic vision.
Right. And we also need to examine the complicated and honestly sometimes very dark personal legacy he left behind.
Because there's a huge contradiction here. Someone whose work is synonymous with this gentle, lighthearted comedy had such a turbulent, high-stakes, and financially ruinous career.
Yeah, his public persona was all about pointing out the absurdity of modern life with warmth. But the engine driving that was a relentless, almost self-destructive perfectionism.
So where does a drive like that even come from? Usually when you hear about an artist willing to starve for their work, they come from nothing. They have nothing to lose.
Which is actually the first major surprise in the sources. Long before he was risking millions on glass cities, Tati was giving up a highly prestigious, very comfortable life just to perform physical comedy during the Great Depression.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he had everything to lose. He was born Jacques Tati in 1907, and his lineage is fascinating. He was of Russian, Dutch, and Italian descent.
Tatashev. That sounds very aristocratic.
It was. His grandfather was actually a general in the Imperial Russian Army.
Wait, a Russian general? How do we get from imperial Russian nobility to a guy doing physical comedy?
Well, the grandfather died under highly suspicious circumstances shortly after marrying a French woman. And the sources suggest she might have actually been a circus performer.
That is a wild family tree. A Russian general meets a French circus performer.
Right. But eventually, his father gets brought into this prestigious Parisian picture framing business, and their clients were the absolute elite. They framed art for Toulouse-Lautrec.
Wow.
So this provided the family with a very comfortable, highly respectable middle-class life.
And obviously the expectation is that young Jacques is going to take over this gilded empire. But looking at the sources, he was a pretty indifferent student. Where he actually shined was on the field. He was a gifted athlete.
Yeah, he played rugby in London and Paris.
And this is where the spark happens, right?
Yeah.
He starts entertaining his rugby teammates in the locker room by impersonating their movements on the field.
Exactly. He had this uncanny ability to reproduce human movement, but with this slight, absurd exaggeration. And then in 1931, the trajectory of his life just completely snaps.
Right in the middle of the Great Depression.
Yep. The global economy is collapsing, and Tati decides, this is the perfect time to defy his family, abandon the high-end framing business, and become a full-time mime.
I just want to underline how insane that is for you listening. Imagine quitting a secure, high-end tech job right as a massive global recession hits just to do experimental street theater.
It defies all logic.
It totally does. It shows this absolute, almost irrational compulsion to perform.
But the thing is, his talent was undeniable. He developed these highly physical mime routines called impression sportives.
Sporting impressions.
Right. And by the mid-1930s, he finds rapid success performing at the ABC Theatre in Paris.
What was he actually doing on stage, though? Mime back then wasn't just being trapped in a box, right?
Nope. He was conjuring entire sporting events out of thin air. The highly influential writer Colette actually wrote a glowing review of him. She described his act as partly ballet and partly sport.
Oh, that's a great description.
Yeah, she was astonished by how he could conjure invisible props. She actually compared him to a legendary centaur like this mythological fusion of man and motion.
Wow, pure physical mastery. But while his physical genius was undeniable, real-world events violently interrupted this rise.
Yeah, World War II breaks out. In 1939, Tati is conscripted into the cavalry. He actually sees combat during the Battle of Sedan, which was a disastrous defeat for the French.
And after his division retreats, he eventually makes his way back to civilian life, performing at Le Lido Cabaret in Paris.
Right. And it was the aftermath of the war that really forged his iconic cinematic persona. Post-war, he forms his own production company, Caddy Films, and transitions to directing.
And in 1949, he releases his first major feature, Jour de Fête. It's about an inept rural postman.
Yeah, and the sources share a really surprising fact about how he shot that movie.
Oh, the camera rig. This is such a great detail. Even on his very first feature, he's taking these massive technical risks.
Completely. He shot it simultaneously in black and white and a brand new color system.
Wait, literally at the same time, two giant 1940s film cameras rolling side by side.
Yes, because the color system was untested. And it's a good thing he did, because the color system failed completely. They couldn't process it.
So if he hadn't shot that black and white backup, his directing career would have ended before it even began.
Exactly. Though his daughter eventually found a way to restore the color version decades later, which is amazing. But it was his next film that really changed everything.
Right, 1953. Les Vacances de Monsieur Hulot, Monsieur Hulot's Holiday.
This is where we officially meet the legend. Shot at a seaside village, it introduced the socially inept Hulot with his trademark raincoat, umbrella, and pipe.
And he's just lampooning the French social classes around him.
Yeah, and the film earned an Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay. Then, in 1958, he releases Mon Oncle, his first successful color film, which critiqued American-style consumerism.
And that one wins the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film.
It did. And there's this great story about when he won the Oscar. The studios basically asked what he wanted, and he simply requested to meet his comedy heroes, Stan Laurel, Max Sennett, and Buster Keaton.
Wow.
Yeah, and Buster Keaton actually praised Tati for carrying on the silent film tradition with sound.
Which raises such a pointed question, right? How does a character with almost no dialogue become an international sensation in an era that had completely moved on from silent film?
It's a great question.
I think it's because Hulot wasn't really telling jokes. He was acting as a mirror. He was reflecting the audience's own increasingly absurd, modernizing world back at them.
That's spot on. So at this point, winning an Oscar usually gives a director a blank check, right?
Right. He could have just churned out Hulot sequels for the rest of his life.
Exactly. But rather than taking the easy road, Tati made a decision that would creatively define him and financially destroy him.
Playtime, released in 1967.
Yes. Tati wanted to make a democratic film about, quote, everybody losing themselves in a commercially globalized, futuristic Paris.
But the scale of this project, I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around the hubris of it.
The scale is unbelievable. He shot it in 70mm over 9 years. It became the most expensive French film in history. He built Tativille.
That's the mini-city of glass and steel on the outskirts of Paris.
Yeah, paved roads, street lights, its own power plant for the massive lighting requirements of 70mm film.
It's like a modern director refusing to use CGI, building a literal 2-scale space station, and then intentionally making the main star a background character.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the tragic fallout was immense. Tati said there was, quote, no safety net, and he was absolutely right.
Because despite critical praise, like Francois Truffaut called it a film from another planet, it was a massive commercial failure. The public just didn't get it.
No, they didn't. And the consequences were devastating. Tati was forced into bankruptcy. His films were literally impounded by banks.
Ugh, that's heartbreaking.
And he had to sell his family home. He did form a new company later with drastically reduced means, Making Traffic, which put Hulot in a gadget-filled RV, and a Swedish TV film called Parade, plus an uncompleted football documentary for Sebastia.
But the era of grand cinematic visions was dead. It just pushes you to consider that fine line between artistic purity and self-destruction.
Absolutely.
But, while Tati's public downfall was driven by this pursuit of artistic perfection, the sources reveal there was a deeply personal, real-world cost he had been hiding since the war.
Yeah, this is where the story takes a very dark turn. A secret that would redefine his legacy decades later.
Right. During World War II, when he was at Le Lido, Tati fell in love with a woman named Herta Schiele. She was an Austrian refugee.
Right. And they had a daughter together, Helga Marie Jean.
But he refuses to recognize the child.
He did. Pressured by his sister, Tati refused to acknowledge Helga. He was actually fired from Le Lido for his behavior. He completely abandoned them. Hulot later joined the French resistance.
And this wasn't just a matter of a missing father figure. The sources share a terrifying detail from 1955.
Yeah, this is so hard to read. In 1955, his teenage daughter Helga was trapped in Maritek during a violent uprising. She literally witnessed the bombing of a market.
She is a teenager in a war zone holding only a French passport. She wrote to Tati, begging for his help to escape to Paris.
And he ignored her completely.
We never responded. Nothing.
Nothing. And this connects directly to The Illusionist, which was an unmade 1950s script by Tati about an aging magician protecting a young woman.
Oh, right. In 2010, Sylvain Chomet released it as this beautiful animated film.
He did. But when it came out, Tati's estranged grandson, Helga's son, Richard, wrote a blistering open letter to Roger Ebert.
Really? What did he say?
He argued that the script was actually Tati's guilt-ridden response to abandoning Helga. He accused Chomet's film of airbrushing this painful family legacy out of existence.
Wow. So he essentially wrote a fantasy where he gets to be the savior to a young girl instead of the father who abandoned his real daughter? How do you even reconcile that?
It's incredibly difficult.
I mean, the man whose entire cinematic universe is built on critiquing the coldness of modern society and championing gentle human connection. He completely abandoned his own daughter in a literal war zone. How do you separate the warmth of the art from the coldness of the artist?
You really can't, fully.
Right.
Reconciling the man and his art is almost impossible. But what makes it even more complex is that the physical survival of his masterpiece films is a story of sheer dedication. And ironically, it was driven by the family he did acknowledge.
Right. After the war, he married and had legitimate children, Pierre and Sophie. And in the 1980s, they had to literally track down the rights to his films to a Swiss bank.
Yeah, because everything had been liquidated and impounded.
Yeah.
And Sophie's dedication is incredible. Even while terminally ill, she founded the films de Mon Oncle.
Wow.
Yeah, and she successfully spearheaded the restoration of both Jour de Fête and Playtime.
And because she saved those films, his visual genius lives on today. I mean, Rowan Atkinson cited Monsieur Hulot's Holiday as a major inspiration for Mr. Bean.
And Steven Spielberg credited Tati's use of space and resourcefulness as a direct influence on the Terminal.
His influence is everywhere. Which really brings us to one final thought for you to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
Tati spent his career warning us about a future where technology, glass walls, and modern ambition alienate us from one another. He saw the coldness of the modern world coming.
He really did.
Yet his own relentless drive to capture that truth on film, combined with his personal failings, ultimately alienated him from his own family and destroyed his financial security. It leaves you wondering, is the ultimate price of holding a perfect mirror up to humanity the loss of your own place within it?